The rain didn't come as a warning. It came like a hush, an ancient hush that blanketed the town in silver sorrow. The road to its edge, little more than hardened earth and weary roots, gleamed with slick rivulets. Behind shuttered windows, lanterns wavered like doubt in a preacher's voice. Most folks had bolted their homes shut early, not to keep out the weather, but to guard against someone they still feared. Miriam Hart. She had long mastered the art of quiet movement, letting the wind speak for her. Her bees slumbered in their hives beneath layers of oilcloth. In her cottage, a soft glow lit the windows, catching on old curtains that drooped like pressed lace. A kettle sighed on a low flame. Miriam sat alone, patching a child's sock she couldn't bear to throw away, though no child had worn it in years. Then came the knock. 3 times. Not desperate, not demanding. Just wet, as if it had wandered through the rain unsure it deserved to be heard. Miriam rose without haste. Her limp, a relic of some long-ago hurt she never spoke of, slowed her steps. The pain was an old companion, unwelcome but settled. When she opened the door, she didn't startle. The man there was drenched, water streaming from his hat brim to the soles of his boots. His coat sagged, heavy with rain. He looked taller than she remembered, and far more worn. His eyes didn't plead. They were hollow, as if he'd scattered parts of himself across every place he passed. In his arms, wrapped in a pieced-together quilt, was a crying baby. "He's not yours," the man said, "but he needs you." Miriam looked at the infant, tiny, pale fists waving, no bigger than the acorn caps that littered her garden. Then she looked back at the man. "Elias Boone," she said quietly. He gave a small nod, his face drawn with guilt. The baby's cry wasn't loud, but it cut through the rain like truth in a courtroom. Miriam stepped aside. "This isn't an invitation," she said. "Just enough to get him out of the rain." The fire gave a small pop as they entered. She reached for the baby. Her touch came without hesitation, shaped by years gone by. The child was hot to the touch, too hot and clearly starving, but she didn't say that aloud. Elias lingered near the doorway like a man uncertain if he belonged on solid ground. She gestured to the rocking chair by the hearth, the one untouched for 7 winters. He hesitated, then lowered himself into it. "I've got no milk," Miriam said. "I brought goats," he rasped. "But he won't take it from me." She made the bottle silently. Her hands were steady, still. But when she held the cloth to the baby's mouth and he began to feed, something in her shifted, like soil thawing beneath spring sun. The child drank greedily. Elias exhaled a sound close to sobbing, though no tears followed. She asked nothing, not about the child's mother, not about the journey that brought them here. Some stories have to ripen before they're told. The kettle began to whistle. She poured 2 cups of nettle tea. His remained untouched. "You came far," she said. 3 towns back," he murmured. "Buried her in Ash Hollow." A silence settled between them again. "Not many would come to me," she said at last. "Not after that girl." "I remember," he said. "But I also remember what you did for my brother's wife. You held her hand when no one else would. Sheriff burned your hands after, didn't he?" "Yunvi," Miriam said, "paid for what the town feared." "They still fear you," Elias said, eyes fixed on the flames. "They fear a woman who's carried blood." He didn't disagree, just watched the fire like it might offer answers. The storm outside quieted to a gentle patter. Miriam peeled back the baby's quilt. In one corner, a name was stitched, just 2 letters, MB. She paused. This was her blanket? Elias nodded. She made it while waiting. Thought it would be a girl. The baby, now full, hiccuped softly. Miriam rose and walked to the cradle in the far corner, long hidden beneath a cloth like a burial shroud. She pulled it back. The old wood gave a small creak as she lowered the child into it. He stirred but didn't fuss, simply leaned into the warmth of her palm. "I never thought I'd hear that sound again," she whispered. Elias looked over. "What sound?" "The quiet after a baby stops crying." He said nothing, only watched as she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and sat again by the fire. "You want to tell me why?" she asked, no accusation in her tone. "I was ashamed," he answered. "Didn't want to come begging. Didn't want to show my face to the woman they call cursed. They've called me worse." He nodded. "I believed them, till she died. Then none of it mattered anymore." She tilted her head. "And now," he met her eyes for the first time, "now I believe in anyone still standing." It wasn't quite trust, nor forgiveness, but something passed between them, a flicker of shared loss, tempered by the child resting between them. Outside, the storm faded to mist. Morning would rouse the bees. The town would begin to whisper. Miriam knew that. But inside, the baby slept. Elias leaned forward, elbows on knees, gazing into the fire. She didn't offer him the bed. He didn't ask. When she finally got up to bank the embers, she spoke softly, like a prayer. "You say he's not mine. Maybe not by blood. But something brought him here." Elias nodded. "You got a name for him?" she asked. He shook his head. "Didn't want to name him until I knew where he belonged." She glanced toward the cradle. "Then I'd say you're halfway there." He stood slowly, boots thudding on the wooden floor. "I'll go," he said, but his feet didn't move. "You already did," she replied. "And you came back." He removed his wet coat and hung it by the hearth. She didn't stop him, didn't ask him to stay, just left the door unlocked for the first time in years. Near dawn, when the child stirred and gave a quiet cry, it was Elias who reached him first. Not all stories begin in love. Some begin in need. And sometimes, that's the holiest beginning of all. The wind that followed the storm carried no apology. It skimmed the prairie, brushing frost onto fence posts and tugging gently at loose shutters. Morning light crept into Miriam Hart's cottage, cautious and pale, landing on the child sleeping peacefully in the cradle. At the sink, Elias Boone rinsed out a tin cup in silence. His shoulders slumped with exhaustion after a night spent half sitting, half watching, slowly realizing he had placed a life in the hands of a woman the town had abandoned. Miriam was already moving, no clatter, no fuss. She moved like memory, quiet, faded, but unmistakably present. Her limp was sharper in the early light. Elias watched her rub her hip as she spooned oats into a pot. She said nothing. He waited, listening to the hush stretch between them. When the baby whimpered, it was Miriam who stepped forward first. No hesitation now, no fear in her hands. She held the baby in the crook of her arm, feeding him slowly, steadily, like the rhythm might calm something unsettled in her own chest. Elias sat across from her, watching. "I never learned how to feed him," he said. She gave a small nod without judgment. "Most men don't." He rubbed at his tired eyes. "He wouldn't take it from me. Screamed every time. He was grieving." "I thought that came later," he added. "It comes when it wants," she murmured. "Babies feel what they can't make sense of." He looked at the infant again, then back at her. "So do grown men." She didn't smile, but something in her face softened around the edges. The baby finished eating, let out a little sigh, and drifted back to sleep. She carried him gently to the cradle, covered him with the blue shawl, and turned to Elias. "You said you buried her in Ash Hollow." He nodded. "How'd she die?" He let out a slow breath. "The bleeding wouldn't stop. Came on too fast. I waited too long. Thought the neighbor's girl could help, but she ran off screaming." "You didn't send for a midwife?" "I thought I could manage it." She turned away slightly. "No," he said quickly. "That's not how I meant it. I didn't want to bring your name back into that house. Not after everything they said. Everything I said. And now I'd carry your name to heaven if it meant keeping that boy alive." The words landed square. She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. "I heard she died," he continued, quieter now. "The girl you tried to help. But no one said much. Only that you failed her. Never told me she was already bleeding when she showed up." Miriam gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "I never knew the full of it," he said. "I just listened and turned away." You weren't the only one, she said, her voice low. I'm sorry. The words hung in the room like rusted iron and old wind. She didn't offer forgiveness. Not then. Outside, the wind scraped leaves across the steps. Distant church bells rang. Later, she wrapped the child against her chest and stepped outside to check on the beehives. Elias followed, coat drawn tight, his steps uncertain. She moved more slowly than usual, favoring her left leg. The baby slept warm against her. He watched her work the hives, her movements sure and practiced, tapping gently on the wooden sides, listening. They're hungry, she said. Storms kept them in too long. He leaned on the fence. Why do you keep doing all this after everything? After they turned on you? She didn't answer right away. Because something still needs me, she said at last. Even if it's only the honeybees. They walked back in silence. The baby made a soft sound, turning his head against her shoulder. Inside, Miriam stirred honey into warm water for the baby's bath. I brought him here because I had nowhere else, Elias said. She poured the water into a basin, testing the heat with her wrist. I figured that. But also because I thought maybe I wasn't meant to raise him alone. Her hands stilled. He stepped a little closer. I'm not asking anything from you, he said. Just, I needed someone who wouldn't look at him and see only a mistake. And what do you see? I see a reason I'm still breathing. She lowered the child into the warm water, one hand supporting his back. The baby squirmed slightly, then relaxed, sighing as if the warmth remembered him. Elias knelt beside her, quiet. He watched how she cupped the water and poured it gently over the baby's chest, humming softly. You still haven't named him, she said. I know. Why? He looked her in the eye. Because I don't know who he'll be. Not yet. Not until I stop being the man who let his mother die. Her hands froze. I wasn't cruel, he whispered. Just proud. And pride kills just as surely as fever. She looked down at the child. He's warm now. Elias reached for the towel she'd laid nearby. He lifted the baby, careful and slow, as if wrapping not just the child but his own remorse in soft linen. Then came the knock. Miriam's shoulders tensed. Outside stood Mrs. Evelyn Pike, bonnet tied tight, jaw set like she expected to catch sin in the act. Behind her stood two women from the prayer circle, hands clasped too tightly for prayer. Morning, Miriam said, voice even. Evelyn's eyes bounced from Miriam to Elias, then locked onto the baby. So it's true, she said. You've taken in a man and a child with no name. Elias said nothing. What do you want, Evelyn? We came to offer guidance. You must understand how fragile your reputation already is. Miriam clenched her hands behind her back. I stopped caring about my reputation the day they left me to bury that girl alone. And now you've taken in another man's burden. That child should be with a respectable family. He's with someone who won't fake kindness just for appearances. Evelyn sniffed. Well, we'll be watching, Miriam. Then bring a chair. The women turned stiffly, skirts swinging, whispers already beginning. When the door shut, Elias let out a breath. Is that going to be a problem? It already was, Miriam said. The day passed with few words between them, but something had changed. That evening, Elias found a hammer and began fixing the step on her porch. She brought him the nails and held the wood steady. He didn't thank her. She didn't smile. When the baby cried in the night, Elias got up. And it was Miriam who brought the warmed bottle, without needing to be asked. Before feeding him, Elias looked over at her in the firelight. He ain't mine. Not really. She leaned in the doorway, shawl tight around her. He's not mine either, she said. But he's here. And sometimes that's enough. Elias nodded. The baby's eyes blinked wide and slow as he drank, and the fire crackled softly in the quiet. I don't know how to raise a child, Elias confessed. I didn't either, Miriam said. Not until I held one. The baby's tiny hand curled tightly around Elias's thumb. Small, that's for sure, he murmured. And in that quiet moment, something unspoken settled between them. It wasn't peace, at least not yet, but it was a kind of quiet agreement. Outside, the world would circle them like wolves, casting judgment in hushed tones. But inside that small home on that cold, still night, a man with no claim sat beside a woman long forgotten by the town. Between them, the child slept, and they both, without words, accepted him. Tomorrow would bring fresh trials. But tonight, the cradle wasn't empty. The door stayed open. The fire grew warm. By the time morning light touched the frost-laced window, the ice had begun to melt, slow beads sliding like tears that had waited until dawn. The whispers in town had started before the sun climbed high. As Miriam stepped outside, jar of warm milk in one hand and a knit cap snug on the baby's head, she already knew what they were saying. Smoke rose from the chapel's chimney and from the mouths of the congregation. It started with Evelyn Pike. Her voice was sharp as flint. The rest were sparks catching fire. He's sleeping in her house, with a child that's neither hers nor his. Scandal like that doesn't stay hidden. She's trying to be a mother again, as if the last time didn't end with a gravestone. The words stretched across the town like barbed wire. Tight, cutting, meant to wound. But Miriam didn't glance toward them once. She had bees to check, roots to cover before the next cold snap, and a porch that creaked under 3 broken steps Elias had begun repairing after breakfast. He worked with a clenched jaw like he was trying to mend more than just timber. The baby was improving. His eyes followed movement now. He made soft noises when Miriam hummed, and gripped her shawl like it meant something to him. She found strength in the way he held on, as though claiming her in return. One afternoon, Elias caught her watching the child as she gently rocked him on the stoop. "Ever think about having one of your own?" he asked. Her hands stilled, and silence stretched between them. It seemed she wouldn't answer. "I did," she said at last. "Once, but nothing more." Later, as Elias chopped wood near the edge of her land, Miriam stood quietly in her garden. Her fingers brushed the edge of a soil bed that had once been left barren. Now it held fresh green shoots pushing through thawed earth. She didn't recall planting them. That afternoon, Elias returned from town with a shadow in his voice. "They're saying you caused his mother's death. That I brought the boy to you to blame you." Miriam said nothing. "They're looking for a reason to drive you out," he added, stepping closer. Her eyes were sharp, steady. "Let them try. I've been gone far longer than they know." He looked pained. "You shouldn't have to carry all this alone." She turned toward him, the wind lifting strands of her hair. "And what would you know about being alone?" His jaw tightened. "More than I ever wanted to." She didn't speak, but the silence said enough. Inside, the baby cried. Both turned toward the sound, instinctively. Miriam moved first. Her limp had faded some. Repetition and necessity had strengthened her. She lifted the child, pressed him gently to her chest, and rocked in slow rhythm, whispering soft syllables he couldn't understand but seemed to need. Elias stood by the hearth, one hand braced on the mantel. "I failed her," he said suddenly. Miriam looked up. "My wife. I thought I could do it all myself. I thought asking you for help meant giving up." Her voice was low. "It would have saved her." "I know." His eyes were fixed on the fire. "I used to believe men had to be the strong ones, that shame was easier to bear than weakness. But now, every time he cries, I hear him asking why I didn't save her." Miriam crossed the room, gently placed the baby into his arms. "Hold him," she said. "You did." The boy quieted almost at once, his small head settling against Elias's collarbone. Elias's hand rose to support the baby's back. "You didn't fail her because you were weak," Miriam whispered. "You failed her because you were alone." A sudden thud hit the window mud. Maybe worse. The baby startled awake, crying. Elias moved toward the door, fists tight, but Miriam stopped him with one hand. "No, don't," she said. "They can't just. They can. They always have. And if you go out there angry, you'll give them the ending they're hoping for." He froze, breathing hard, hand on the doorknob. Then slowly he stepped back. Miriam wrapped the child in a blanket, kissed his soft head, and began humming an old lullaby from a life long past. A life this town never allowed to live. That night, she sat by the fire stitching a torn hem. The baby curled nearby, fingers twitching in his dreams. Elias moved along the shelves, eyes scanning her jars and preserves. "You keep everything," he said. "They might come for my name again," she answered, needle never pausing. "But I won't let them take the healing too." He watched her quietly, arms folded. "Do you ever wish you'd left it all behind?" he asked. Her fingers stilled for only a moment. "No," she said softly. "Some things are worth staying for, even if the world says otherwise." Time hung suspended. "Then why didn't you leave?" he asked. She looked up at him, the firelight catching her eyes. Her voice was quiet but firm. "If I leave, they win. They bury the truth with my name, and women like me stop mattering." Elias watched her, his expression unreadable. "You matter." They held each other's gaze, unmoving, unblinking. After a long pause, she said, "You know what this town hates more than a fallen woman? One who stands up the next day like nothing can stop her." Later, while hanging laundry in the yard, Miriam noticed a child peering at her from the treeline. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, barefoot, her face twisted with both curiosity and fear. Miriam raised her hand slowly in a gentle wave. The girl hesitated, then darted away. That afternoon, a rock shattered the window. It missed the baby's cradle by inches. Elias boarded it up with cloth and wood. Miriam swept up the glass without a word. They barely ate that night. The baby wouldn't settle, and the house felt even smaller. At dusk, Elias stood in the doorway, eyes fixed on the deepening dark. Miriam didn't invite him in. She only said, "That child isn't the only one they're trying to run off." He turned to her, uncertain. "You're not a burden, Elias," she said. "You're just a man who isn't done yet." He took off his coat, hung it beside the door, and stayed outside. Smoke rose from chimneys, from lips, from lies that burned brighter the longer truth stood firm. But inside, the cradle was full, the fire warm, and the town, despite its whispers, couldn't undo the quiet bond growing between a man stripped of pride and a woman who had nothing left to lose. It started with a letter. Neat, sharp handwriting, too precise to be anything but deliberate. Sheriff Dake delivered it himself at sunrise, his coat still carrying the smell of stale tobacco and sanctified silence. He didn't dismount, just sat on his horse, rain pooling in his hat brim, face carved with old regrets. Miriam stepped out with the baby in one arm and a bottle in the other, her gaze steady. "Town council wants a word," he said, voice like gravel dragged across old wood. Elias appeared behind her, his jaw clenched. The sheriff's eyes flicked to him. "This ain't about your pride, Boone. It's about what's best for the child." Miriam didn't flinch. "Best, according to who?" "The law," Dake said, handing over the paper. Its words were cold and official: mandatory meeting, noon, town hall. Custody in question. Elias muttered something too low to catch. Miriam simply nodded once and closed the door. They walked to town in silence. No one greeted them. Streets were emptied. No children's laughter. No hammer ringing from the smithy. Just their footsteps and the baby's soft cooing as he rested against Elias's chest. Miriam walked with her head held high, shawl tight around her shoulders. She was past caring what they thought. Inside, the benches were packed. Dake stood at the front beside 2 elders and Mrs. Evelyn Pike, draped in black, the picture of righteousness. Elias held the baby close. Miriam's hand touched his back. He tensed, then steadied. Dake cleared his throat. "We're here because a child, without proper family, has been taken in by a woman with no legal claim, and a man with no formal proof of relation." A murmur rippled. Miriam stood still. "He is the child of Elias Boone and a deceased woman named May Beth Boone," Dake continued. "But there's no birth record, no official name, and no maternal kin." One elder spoke. "The town has a duty to determine the child's care." Elias stepped forward. "And what about the father?" "You have no paperwork," another elder said. No marriage record. No name for the child. He gestured at Miriam. And this woman disgraced for medical misconduct. The town remembers. Miriam's jaw tightened. The town remembers what it wants to. A louder murmur. Someone hissed. Mrs. Pike stood. We're offering a stable home. A good one. I've raised children. He'd be cared for properly. He's not lacking now, Elias snapped. He needs a name? He'll have one. A place? He's got one. And yes, he's in the home of a woman your kind shunned. But she didn't turn him away. Pike glared. He needs stability. A mother. Church. Miriam turned to the council. You think because I fell I forgot how to rise? I never defended myself when you whispered, when you carved me out. But that baby came to me hungry and alone, and I opened the door. None of you did. Dake stepped forward. It's not about what you did, Miss Hart. It's about your right to keep doing it. Elias moved without thinking, stepping in front of her. I don't have land. I don't have a wife. I barely have a name left. But I have this boy. I carried him across 3 counties, hoping someone wouldn't shut a door in his face. Now you'd take him from the only one who didn't. Mrs. Pike raised her voice again. The law, Elias roared back, didn't hold my wife's hand while she died. The room fell into silence. Even Pike took a step back. Elias looked at Miriam and gently placed the baby in her arms. Then he turned to the crowd. You want to say I failed her? Fine. I did. I failed her when I listened to men like you instead of her. But I won't fail this child. His voice shook. He let it. He knows her shawl, calms when she sings, reaches for her. And you'd tear that apart just to feel righteous. A heavy pause. The elders exchanged glances. One finally said, the law requires formal kinship. Marriage would suffice. The room stilled. Elias turned to Miriam, stunned. She wasn't. She looked calm, like she'd seen it coming. This is what you call mercy? She asked. No, Elias said quickly. No, it's not mercy. And it's not obligation. I didn't come here looking for a wife. I came looking for someone better than me. I found her. I'll marry her if I must, but not out of duty. Out of gratitude I'll never repay. Tension crackled. Miriam looked down at the baby, sleeping peacefully. She stepped forward. I'm not marrying him today. Her voice rang out. A gasp. But I won't give up this child either. A wave of murmurs. Pike looked furious. Miriam turned to the elders. If the law says only kin can raise him, then I'll become his kin. I'll sign whatever you need. I'll raise him as mine. You're no relation, someone shouted. Moses wasn't Pharaoh's daughter's kin, either, she answered. But she saved his life. The elder hesitated, then gave a slow nod. We'll draft guardianship papers. But this isn't over. We'll be watching. Miriam didn't flinch. Elias exhaled. And in the middle of it all, the baby slept on, safe for now. Miriam didn't look back. She only said what she had to and turned away, her back to them all. Elias followed her out, too stunned to speak. Outside, the air had softened. The clouds parted just enough to let slivers of sunlight fall across the porch rails like gold. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. You didn't have to say that, he murmured. I did. Her voice was quiet but certain. Even if I hadn't. Especially if you hadn't, she said, meeting his gaze with something firm and steady. He swallowed hard. But you meant it. She didn't answer, not with words. But she gave a small, near-imperceptible nod before walking ahead of him. That night, the wind quieted, and the fire burned low. Elias sat by the cradle, sanding away a crack along its edge with long, patient strokes. Miriam watched from across the room, rocking the baby in time with the rhythm of his hands. They didn't speak of marriage again, not that night, not yet. But something passed between them, wordless and necessary, like a thread being tied. Outside, the town kept its wary eye, but within the cottage, the baby slept soundly. For the first time since Elias had arrived, the child smiled in his sleep. By morning, a thin frost trimmed the fence posts, silver against the dawn light, delicate like lace etched by winter. The prairie held still. Even the bees stayed tucked in their hives. Inside, the baby stirred. His cry soft but insistent, the kind that said the dream had ended, and real arms were needed. Elias was already up, rubbing his eyes as he crossed the room. He lifted the child without hesitation, his hands sure, no longer seeking Miriam's nod. She stood in the bedroom doorway, hair loose from sleep, shawl drawn tight at her throat. She watched him, quiet, unreadable, but there was tenderness in her gaze. Not love, not yet. Something older. A recognition built from endurance, shared burdens, and the quiet awe of surviving. She stepped forward and handed him a warm bottle. Their fingers touched briefly. Neither spoke. Then came the knock. They didn't move. Came again, harder now, sharp with authority. Elias shifted the baby and opened the door. Cold air swept in. Sheriff Dake stood there, hat in hand, flanked by two men, strangers, wearing the badges of state officials. "What's this?" Elias asked, his voice steady. Dake looked first at the baby, then to Miriam behind Elias. "They're from the county. Evelyn Pike sent word. They're here about guardianship. Want to see documents. Speak to Miriam. Alone." "No," Elias said immediately. Dake held up a hand. "Let's not make it worse." "It's already worse," Miriam replied. She moved past Elias, standing barefoot on the cold wood. "You want to speak, fine. But the child stays with me. I won't leave him." The men exchanged a glance. One gave a short nod. "That's fine." She wrapped the baby in a shawl and followed them down to the old tree where horses waited. Elias stayed on the porch, fists clenched, helpless again. The questioning took place out in the open. A table pulled from the church hall, papers rustling in the wind, ink frozen in its well. They asked for proof. She gave them her mother's Bible, handwritten notes, a message Elias had scribbled on the baby's blanket. "He has her eyes." "Nothing legal," one of the men said. "No blood tie, no marriage, no name." "I have something stronger," Miriam replied. "He stops crying when I hold him." "That's not law," the man said. "No," she agreed. "It's mercy." He looked at her for a long time, as if weighing more than what was written. At last he said, "We'll come back. With a judge." They rode off, empty-handed. Elias walked her back home. "I should have gone," he said. "You've come far enough," she answered. That evening Miriam braided her hair. She lit the oil lamps and made stew from the scraps they had. Elias shaved, combed his hair, and wore his best shirt. The baby slept in a basket between them, one Elias had repaired with fresh rope. They left the door unlocked. No one came. Dawn broke under a bruised sky. Wind swept across the land like a stirred ghost. Miriam stood at the window with the child, holding him close. Elias wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "They'll come back," he said. "I know. Are you scared?" "No," she whispered. "Just tired of being brave." He looked at the baby. "We should name him." "You first," she said. He took a breath. "Samuel." She smiled. "That's what I was thinking." Word came later that day Evelyn Pike had fallen ill. No visitors. By week's end, the county sent notice. No judge was coming. No charges. No removal. The case had fallen through the cracks, too small to matter anymore. Elias read the letter on the porch while the wind played with its edges. Inside, Miriam rocked Samuel, humming something nameless that felt like belonging. "You did it," Elias said. She shook her head. "We did nothing but keep breathing. That's more than most." Spring arrived with shy green shoots at the fence. The hive stirred again. The child laughed for the first time. A bubbling, delighted sound that made Elias stop his work just to hear it. One morning, Miriam stepped outside with Samuel in her arms and saw Elias repairing a wagon wheel. The baby reached out toward the sunlight, giggling. Elias looked up. "You never asked me to stay," he said. "I never had to." He stood and brushed sawdust from his hands. "I'd like to anyway." She looked at him, long and quiet, then gave a single nod. In that nod lived all the things they'd never been given: respect, choice, peace, built with hands and time. They never married. No papers. No ceremony. The town stopped asking. They simply watched. Miriam rebuilt her porch plank by plank. She laughed at the market. Elias carried Samuel on his shoulders through the chapel green. When the boy said, "Mama," it was in Miriam's arms. A year passed then too. No one remembered the scandal. Only the child with the wide smile, and the couple who made a home without needing to explain. Some stories don't end in flames. Some end in warmth, earned slowly, like morning light through winter glass. And if anyone asked how it began, they'd be told. He knocked on her door in the rain, a baby in his arms, and said, "He ain't yours, but he needs you." And she, scarred, steady, healing, opened the door and let them in. Because sometimes the ones you're meant to save are the ones who save you. Not with promises, not with grand declarations, but with the simple, unwavering choice to stay. And mercy, when it comes, is rarely loud. It knocks gently, waits quietly, and stays long enough to become something like love.